So today I'll be looking at the water quality and supply challenges created by large-scale mass tourism in island nations. So just the layout, I'll first be looking at the definitions of both large-scale tourism development and mass tourism, followed by island nations and large-scale mass tourism, the three challenges I'm choosing to focus on today. And then going to follow up with some IWRM recommendations for improvements in these areas, the conclusion, and lastly my references. So mass tourism can be defined as a form of tourism that involves thousands of people frequenting a resort or resort region at a certain time of year. Large-scale tourism development is the development that facilitates this mass tourism. So whether it be the hotels along the shoreline, the recreational activities that they do while they're in the area, the restaurants, basically the tourism industry. So island nations and mass tourism, the three challenges I'm focusing on today. So the first being foreign funding for intensive development, the second being seasonality of mass tourism itself, and the third being the lack of development regulation in this tourism industry. So in terms of foreign funding for intensive development, often if it is foreign money coming in for development, there's a lack of knowledge surrounding local resources. Yes, they have the funds to do the development, but they're not sure of the resources in the area or what, in terms of what they can use. This leads to deterioration of local coastal ecosystems and freshwater supply for tourists and local use, and often improper processes for wastewater treatment because the development happens so quickly. In terms of seasonality, so mass tourists often are drawn to hotels, and hotels are the highest consumers in the tourism industry for water. Because there are peak consumptions and seasonality, or when mass tourists like to visit an area, often these months of preference fall within the dry season in these island nations. Tourist habits. So when mass tourists especially, are on holiday mode, there's no pressure, they're more likely to shower longer, they're more likely to go to the spa, they're not mindful or conscious of their water use. And this just adds to the pressures of seasonality because there are more mass tourists in the area, they use more water at that time. So the lack of development regulations for tourism development. So because the goals are primarily economic gain in the tourism industry, especially for mass tourists, policy created to protect the rights of water really aren't observed at all. There's not often cost allocations to water use. So again, these tourists are more apt to use. If it doesn't cost them anything, they're not going to worry about it. And lastly, regulations to acknowledge the fragile geography of island nations. So because they are an island on their own, often the topography is a little different, and this can lead to more complications when it comes to wastewater treatment and infiltration into groundwater. So my recommendations for improving water quality and supply in these situations. The first being encouraging small-scale tourism. This discouraging of large-scale will it's less of a footprint, so it has less of an effect on the natural environment. Next would be stakeholder engagement and education. So to engage the tourists and really educate them on their impact while they are there. It's not just temporary, well, it is temporary for them, but not for the local users. And lastly, policy creation at the local level for the regulation of tourism development. So activity on the island, just to acknowledge and regulate development in that area, as well as water consumption. So to conclude, acknowledging the effects of mass tourism and large-scale development that large-scale development has on an island nation is the first step to solving the problem. I believe that using IWRM type processes will ensure that these beautiful destinations can be maintained and enjoyed by tourists for years to come. These are my references. Thank you.